Welcome to Future Talk. On today's program, we're going to talk about computerizing the sense of smell and what olfactory technology might be able to achieve in the future. We've made huge strides with the senses of sight and hearing. We can capture pictures and sounds by mechanical means, store them in digital form on computers, and reproduce them at will. We cannot yet do that with aromas, but my two guests are working on the problem. Chris Hansen is the founder of a company called Aromyx, which started in 2006, and which is a leader in the field of olfactory science. Chris has been involved with early-stage technologies for over 20 years and has a successful track record of bringing new technologies to market. Luke Schneider is on the board of directors of Aromyx and is also the founder and chief scientific officer of Target Discovery Incorporated, a cancer diagnostics company. Previously, Luke did extensive work in inhalation therapy at SRI International, and some of the biological models he created are part of the Aromyx technology. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Great to have you here today.
Thank you, Marty.
Chris, let me start with you. You're the founder and president of Aromyx. What is Aromyx actually working on? What products are you trying to produce?
Well, we're producing a platform and a disposable biochip that essentially captures the human sense of smell and taste, and we're using that for customers in the consumer packaged goods, food and beverage industries that want a scientific way to analyze and design new aromas and flavors.
So this chip can sense aromas and then record them?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It does it much the same way the human nose and tongue do, because we use the same biochemical stack from the nose and tongue. We found a way to get that onto a chip. And the really fascinating thing is we show the same biochemical signals that your nose and your tongue would send to the brain.
Now, is the chip attached to something? Where does it record the information?
Yeah, we have a sensor body that goes along with it, and it basically plugs into a laptop through a USB connection.
Does it have a better sense of smell than the actual human nose? Why can't a human do that?
Well, humans do. Our skulls, frankly, get in the way of seeing the biochemical signals. And so, you know, companies in the food and beverage industry, for example, really want to see the signals that go to the consumer brain when you consume a cup of Starbucks coffee or eat some Kraft macaroni and cheese. They haven't been able to see that with humans, so we show them a way to get at those signals.
So these companies want to know if their food products smell the way they should?
That's one use, so that they adhere to the brand, you know, so the Kraft macaroni and cheese, every box of it tastes like Kraft macaroni and cheese is supposed to. There's probably more interest in using this to design new products or redesign existing products.
Yeah, in the industry, there's roughly 30,000 flavors and fragrances that are used in consumer packaged good products. And over the next 3 years, they estimate 10,000 of those are going to disappear, either because they're over harvested, like vanilla. They're being sourced from regions that are in war-torn strife, so they can't get it.
So you can't get the materials.
You can't get the materials, or internet rumors start and people refuse to use them anymore, or they're just ruled off of formulary because they've now discovered with better science that they're actually carcinogens or teratogens or are bad for you.
Well, are you looking to create artificial smells like we have artificial flavors?
I think that's a secondary use. What the real problem is, if you lose the ingredients or a core ingredient in something like Old Spice, an old established brand, makes a lot of money, but now you can't make it. How do you make it smell the same if you lose one of those key odor ingredients? They know experimentally they can mix things together, trial and error for years, trying to discover a way to mimic it. We give them a device that allows them to digitally record the current scent and then mix and match products in a computer to mimic that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the sense of smell itself, because this is something I'm interested in. We have some slides. Can we see the first slide, please? All right, so the text is probably a little small to read, but that's basically molecules touching on scent receptors, looks like.
Yeah, that's a schematic essentially of the nose. So you have what's called a main olfactory epithelium, which is a collection of neurons inside the nose in a little pad up in your sinuses. And when you inhale, the volatile odor chemicals go into your nose, and they go through the mucous membrane and find a receptor that they bind to. Each neuron in this little pad has a different receptor protein, and the olfactory chemical will bind to one but not bind to another. And it's the pattern that it triggers that your brain then interprets as orange. So, you know, your mother, you smell something as a child, your mother says this is an orange, you learn to associate that pattern in your brain with the orange.
And you basically want to mimic this functionality by mechanical means?
We want to do this, the same basic biochemistry, but do it in a chip that we can record that digitally, get the same answer every time. When you go, what typically is done now is you go to a focus group and they can tell you, well, if you've never smelled an orange, how do you describe in words to somebody what an orange is? Okay, it's very difficult. We can do that as a digital representation.
Now, one of the questions I have is whether there's such a thing like primary aromas, like primary colors, so that like every scent can be represented as some combination of the primaries. In fact, we have another slide which illustrates that. Can we see that slide? Okay,
yeah.
So is that indicating some primary sense and then subsense?
Yeah, this was actually developed by Ann Noble at UC Davis. And it's the aroma wheel for wines. So this is what they use in the enology program at Davis. So when you talk to a wine connoisseur, they'll describe a wine as grassy or earth tones or nutty. So there's roughly, the guess is somewhere between 13 to 25 primary odors, and probably a range of maybe 60 to 90 secondary odors around that. You can go out to tertiary.
So we're not sure.
We're not sure how many dimensions that space has right now, because we have no way to measure it like you do with color. Color is a four-dimensional space, but odor, we have an internal bet of how many dimensions the odor space is.
Well, speaking of the odor space, we have another slide which illustrates that. So let's take a look at that and see what we can learn from that. So this is an odor graph formulation. So what are we looking at here?
Well, the idea is the main picture that all the arrows point to. That is, let's say, Old Spice, to go back to the Old Spice example. That's Old Spice today. You're losing some of those ingredients, so now we have to find other ingredients that we've measured with the chip. So think of that, the X and Y axis on the bottom of the graph as the different receptor proteins that are on this chip. So they're positioned out on an array. And then the height of the bar is the amount of excitation of that receptor that you're measuring. So that's our quantitative measure. Now, by knowing what the odor is we're trying to mimic, we can look at the space of all the other odors that we can combine to mimic that primary that we'd like to match.
Now, does the chip generate that automatically? So if the chip senses an aroma, it generates this graph without your having to create it by hand?
It's literally a measurement, just like you're taking a photograph of something, and the photograph reproduces what the camera sees or what the eye sees. This is the same thing, it's just reproducing exactly what the nose would smell.
And just to make the sense of smell, make it have a little more sense, we have another graph which is sort of analogous to a color space, which, let's take a look at this. So this is a color space, but it's sort of analogous, I guess, to the sense of smell.
Yeah, I actually used to work my former life at DuPont, and DuPont invented color space. They invented something called the do-color machine. If you go to any paint supply place now, they'll measure anything you want to match, and the computer will determine what blend to use to match that color. In your printer, your computer printer, it's the same thing. It's CMYK or RGB. It's a four-dimensional space for color.
Now, is one of the goals to generate aromas? So, for example, you would be able to generate the smell of an orange without needing an actual orange.
That's the goal.